Hello and welcome to the DSP Leaders Summit on the Open Telco. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and coming up now is our Solutions and Strategies Roundtable, where we'll be discussing open architectures for the next-gen telco. Is it the right approach for telcos to build a single distributed open platform to offer new services? Is there a one-size-fits-all horizontal model available that will do the job? Or will telcos have to architect their own solutions for their own specific needs? Well, let's find out what our guests think, and I'm delighted to introduce Neil McRae, Managing Director, Architecture and Technology Strategy and Chief Architect for BT Group, Diego Lopez, Senior Technology Expert at Telefónica, and Susan James, Senior Director, Telecommunications Strategy with Red Hat. Hello everyone, good to see you all again. Thank you very much for taking part in this round table. Now, based on input from our viewers, we've drawn up 5 key questions for this discussion. So these are the areas that are the most important to our community. So for the first one, how does a horizontal platform model differ from a vertical one, and what are the benefits and drawbacks? Diego, perhaps I could ask you this one first.
Basically, a horizontal platform allows you to reuse it for different services as the needs appear, and be much more flexible, scalable, agile, whatever you want to call it. That makes that approach extremely appealing, though in many cases we should not forget that, the networking environment is not as uniform as we would like it to be. You have to reach far places, have to deal with different environmental conditions because you have to be there where people are. And I would say that, a fully horizontal platform is extremely appealing. I don't believe that a completely horizontal approach is something that telcos can achieve, but at least making it homogeneous and in management and in how they manage with software is highly desirable. The main disadvantage is basically if you have not solutions that are precisely tailored to fit a particular problem space, then in most cases you get some degree of suboptimal performance. The point is to make this suboptimal reasonable enough so the advantages of the homogeneous management can be higher than the disadvantages.
Thank you, Diego. Susan, what about you? How do you see the horizontal platform model differing from the vertical one? Because we're going to get onto some specifics a bit later, but for now, what are the differences and what are the advantages and drawbacks?
I think, Diego makes a really good point. There are going to be specific use cases where, performance and maybe a single use case will certainly mean that a vertical solution is going to be outperform. I think, we've been on this journey of horizontal platforms for a number of years, and I think there's been a lot of learnings gained through that sort of open stack journey. And now as we transition into containers, there is a lot to be gained from a horizontal platform, but it does mean that, you need to be very clear in what are the goals that you're aiming for, what the KPIs are. I think, there's you talked earlier in one of the other sessions about, the automation part of that. You need to have an end-to-end automation view of this so that when you're deploying different kinds of workloads on there, you're gaining speed and flexibility, and that, by having that full automation, you're gaining time to revenue in a much faster way. So I think, COVID has been an interesting time. Having networks that are sort of composable has been a huge benefit. But, we really do need to focus on making sure that we execute on it right, and that we do start to look at scale in the same way. I think one of those early mistakes that we made is we had all of these choices, so everyone chose something different, and it became a smorgasbord. You still need to have that same view around scale, and we need to make sure that yes, we have flexibility, we have choice, but once you make that choice, we need to make sure that we get scale, and not just across one operator, across many.
All right, thanks, Susan. That's an interesting point at the end there as well about scaling across multiple operators. Neil, what about yourself? What would you see as the benefits and perhaps drawbacks of the horizontal platform model?
If you're kind of doing sales and running Salesforce, why wouldn't you? It does everything you need. I think if you're a telco and you're trying to serve lots of different markets, I think to have the same platform for every market feels challenging to me. So for example, we run the emergency services network here in the UK, and having that on the same platform as people kind of, doing their shopping or playing video games, or, testing things, to me that feels extreme. And it certainly, when you look at the lower level infrastructure and the differences required for different use cases, then you start to think there's some aspects of that I think, as far as I can see in the near term future, it looks hard to get that, truly the same for everybody. And if I think about it, we're putting in some of our infrastructure, we're putting really high spec 3D cards. In other parts of our infrastructure, we're putting timing and synchronization. I think at a tooling level, or a kind of almost like a platform as a service level, I think there's more opportunity there to be, more horizontal. But even that in itself has drawbacks for high demand workloads, which, we see in telecommunications, and we see, we're not like a 9 to 5 business. We're a 24/7 by 365 business. And, that means that you've got a different set of requirements that you need to meet and be able to deliver against. So I think, my sense is we'll probably end up slightly tiered rather than all, horizontal or vertical. And then ultimately, does moving that way either save us enough money that it's worth doing? Because ultimately, there's not a lot of other good reasons to do it in my mind, or by having some sort of tiering or different capabilities, are we able to monetize them? And I think when I reflect on 5G, with slicing, with ULRCC, for low latency, it kind of feels like that's some of the path that we're headed towards, is more of a kind of tiering approach to different platform solutions for different use cases.
All right, thanks very much, Neil. Yeah, very interesting about the tiering approach there, because this also fits nicely with our second viewer question. Diego, is there evidence yet that a one-size-fits-all horizontal model can actually work for telcos?
It can work to some extent, yes. As Neil was saying, that depends very much on the market. And what is important is that in cases like, for example, if we are talking about the kind of regular approach that you can follow for a massive market, for sure it works. And our experience, precisely in the virtualization of fixed access, or the virtualization of certain the mobile services, the mobile core, etc., is something that it works. And depending on the maturity of this deployment is already working, and we have been through experiences showing that, again, the performance penalties that you incur one way or another are worth because of the advantages you have in flexibility, and in something that is equally important, that is the extending the lifetime of the infrastructure as you acquire it. Because when you acquire new infrastructure, you focus this on you put the most demanding services, new demanding services on the new one, and you can use a series of let's say graceful decommissioning of the software and the hardware. Again, this is something that is not going, I don't believe that it will be a one single size fits all. It's more a one single style, if you like. I mean, it's something that we will require always some degree of differentiation in certain areas or in certain kind of services that are more demanding in terms of basically in terms of capacity of processing, capacity of storage, accessibility, environmental conditions, whatever. Again, let me say, the important thing, as I see it, is about the fact that we would need an homogeneous way of dealing with it. One size fits all when talking about orchestrating, controlling, managing, collecting data, etc. And the possibility, and something that is equally important, is that we can, even in the case that that affects the quality of service, is that we can go through something that I learned when I was working in the scientific networks. Is quite important in some cases, that is graceful degradation. That instead of, in the case of a failure, you have some backup that is not necessarily the same you have originally, and that doesn't allow you to reach a top level of service, but allows you to provide some degree of service that in some cases can be essential.
Thank you, Diego. Susan, we've heard from Neil and Diego. We talked about yes, but, or rather, differentiation, tiering, for example. So is that your take as well? It's not quite a one size fits all horizontal model for every telco. There's caveats here.
Absolutely. And I would say that, you always want to have choice. So it's, even if you have a really super efficient way of doing what I would describe it as sort of one type of workload, you're still going to want to have choice there. So maybe with one operator, it goes with one and someone else goes with a different option there. But I do think that there is a benefit at scale with specific types of workloads. So if it's a data plane grouping of workloads, you sort of can get a model there that's going to work very well, or compute heavy workloads or storage. I think you're going to see, to Neil's point, some kind of tiering around that. And I do believe, though, that, we can get a lot better scale with, specific configurations of hardware that are then and sort of full stack of software that gives you a better economies of scale. But to Neil's point, not every workload is going to be applicable to those groupings. So you will have things that go outside of that. So it is a yes and no answer.
Thanks, Susan. Well, we should move on to our third question from our viewers, because this one gets into the nitty-gritty. We have quite a demanding audience. So the question is, how should a telco actually go about planning and specifying and building such a platform? Are there good examples that are relevant to the telecoms industry? Neil, perhaps I can come to you first.
I think definitely experiment with them. We've been looking at actually a couple of the platforms that hyperscalers are making available to us. So Anthos from Google and Amazon's Elastic Compute Service. But also we're working with Canonical on their cloud native capability as well. And I think, it's interesting because, there's three solutions, and I think Microsoft have got something and IBM have something, and there's a lot of different solutions that at the heart is pretty much, when you dig into it, there's not a lot of difference between them except in the tooling. And I think everyone needs to kind of figure out what's the right tooling for their organization. We've done a lot of work with Anthos. We've done a lot of work with AWS and trying to leverage their platforms. And actually, really fair play to AWS. They've made their platform open. You can download it from GitHub. It's quite impressive what they've done. And I think, I'd like to see more of that happen, and really the hyperscalers sharing that type of information and capability is very, very useful. There's also, we use Cloud Foundry as well for our application side, and one of the great things, is kind of networks and IT, or digital, as we trendily call it now, come together. The need to be able to write applications that sit, in the public internet, or sit in a really kind of high demand area. Something like Cloud Foundry, which has probably got a new name now, I think it's called Tanzu or something like that. Sorry, VMware, you can shoot me later. But we know it's Cloud Foundry. It allows developers a safe environment and a consistent environment for them to write code and build applications, and not have to worry about some of the underlying issues in the network or in the operating system. And we've had massive success with that platform, and enabling some of our kind of new digital solutions get to market really quickly. But we experimented a lot, and then we built our own tool chain around it, in terms of how we deploy stuff, how we test it, even the coding standards that we use around it, and then also how we work with other companies who want to use our platforms for pushing apps out there. So I think, I probably sound like a stuck record on this guy, but what you'll find is, in a lot of in telcos particularly, our skills and our ability to kind of consume this is at various different levels, and we're having to scale up massively and train people on how this stuff works, and they're experimenting with it as part of that training. So it's easy to talk about a lot of these platforms. Actually getting them up and running and useful in your own internal supply chain, if you will, is a big task, and also then getting the developers to buy into it, because they kind of like their own, they like to have their own hardware to test things, they like to have their own environment. So actually, no, we want to kind of standardize this a little bit so it's easier for us to manage. And we do that because of security, audit, compliance. It just makes that bit of the business a little bit easier for us all. But I think there's a huge amount of choice out there. And back to the point made earlier, I think there's a danger of fragmentation, which could be useful from a competition point of view. But I don't see enough of a difference between the different platforms for it to really be probably sustainable, that all of these platforms will exist, 5 years from now.
Well, thanks very much, Neil. You never sound like a broken record. Don't worry about that. Diego, there are, as Neil says, there's a lot of platforms out there, but equally there's a lot of expertise required to get the most out of them. So what's your advice to those telcos who are still looking at planning, specifying, and building platforms?
The telco people, the network engineers, the people that are dealing with the design and the operation of the services are, I would say, they are good at learning, and this is something that from time to time we believe that this is the case. That there are a lack of skills. Personally, for sure, they are not probably aware of the latest version around DevOps or the hottest language around, but the thing is, should not be that much complicated. And for sure, to master a particular platform, a particular solution, you require some time. But I would say, at least in the group of people I deal with, normally they are quite used to the fact that they need to use different tools, and they are eager to learn about these different tools. So personally, I have heard very often that there is a strong challenge about reskilling people, etc. I believe that is more an organizational matter on the one hand. On the other hand, is I believe as well that there is a conceptual problem when it comes to dealing with a network. I mean, people is very much used to certain set of abstractions that are, for example, dealing with data, dealing with streams, dealing with the network, but the network seen as a very focus on the endpoints and not on the intermediate points, etc. And probably one of the things that we need is precisely a set of platforms and abstractions, languages, libraries you name it, that precisely allow network people to work with the networks in a way in which they can recognize and in which they can directly apply their expertise. This is something that, to some extent, when people started to talk about something like the northbound interfaces of SDN, or they talk about intent-based networking, I think we should move in that direction. Though, for the moment, when you think about the northbound interface of SDN, people tend to think in terms of REST APIs and only REST APIs, no abstractions, no modules, no possibilities of doing other manipulation than a single stateless transaction. And in the case when it's that's something that at the end, and when we talk about the intent, people tend to think in terms of, yes, pure natural language processing, and intent should be associated precisely, in my view, with an abstract view of the network and the elements that are relevant when thinking about the network and how you manipulate them. Reskilling people is more important precisely about not only about telling them that they have to use this or that platform, but as well providing them the abstractions that are powerful enough to be used.
Thank you, Diego. Susan, let me recap the question again, and this is: how should a telco go about planning, specifying, and building such a platform? And are there any good examples for the telecoms industry?
I think the example that was on one of your other sections, where Christoph Hiltz from Deutsche Telekom ran through the NEMS project that they have been working on, is a really good example of that, where they've taken a end-to-end view of what it is that they want to deliver. They've put some really ambitious goals in place, and then put the relevant KPIs. And built it in a way that says, okay, this is the first workload that we're going to deliver on this platform. So the decisions that we take, need to be done in a way that other workloads can be put on as a second and third step. But they've done it in a way that says, we want to be able to provision this, basically instantaneously. So, provisioning a service that would have previously taken, a couple of 100 days to get done, they can now do in, say, a couple of hours or one day. And not taking the excuses to say, oh, well, this needs to happen and this needs to happen. We need to get this done in this time budget, if you like. We need to be able to introduce software, continuously. How do you actually build an environment that will allow you to do that? And say, go from introducing new software through that process of cleaning and making sure that there's no bugs introduced to being rolled out. I think they've done a great job of that. So I think, yes, it absolutely can be done. But to Neil's point, you absolutely need to have the right tooling, the right CI/CD pipeline, the right mentality. To Diego's point, this is about how you engage with your teams, how you give them the skills and tools to be able to do the job, and create the right ecosystem between the service provider and the partners that they're working with to be able to achieve that sort of vision and goals that you set out for yourselves for that use case that you're going to be delivering on.
Great, thank you very much, Susan. And the project you mentioned there, if any viewers are interested in delving deeper into that, that's the Deutsche Telekom Next Generation IMS project, the NIMS project. And there's a lot of information on the site if you're interested in that. Moving on to our next viewer question, and we've got a couple of quite quick questions remaining. Neil, are virtual machine platforms still an option?
I don't think they've ever been an option. Listen, back in, I think it was 2012 during the Olympics, we were working with Intel on what is now NFV, and we had lots of use cases, and it looked really exciting, and then we kind of discovered that the kind of mode of that sort of virtualization, you kind of hit complexity and glass ceilings all over the place. And I think there are some people who, back then would never have agreed with me, but perhaps have kind of moved towards my thinking. Where I've always been trying to get to is kind of look at the network platform as a pool of capabilities that you can pull in what you need when you need it. And virtualization's got too many anchors and kind of walls around it for it to really be that useful. So listen, don't get me wrong, virtualization's a massively brilliant technology. It's brought sustainability to computing. It's brought many benefits, but it feels in my mind, it feels very monolithic. So I came across a platform called Mesosphere, which came out of it was a company that came out of something that Apache had kind of built, which was this kind of platform that was really truly thinking about the compute and storage and network as bits of things that you could pull together. And from that, and as soon as I saw that, and actually it's what Twitter moved towards, in the early days of Twitter, you'd see the whale, and when it was busy, now you never see the whale because they kind of moved to this cloud native, and this was probably one of the first real cloud native solutions or platforms out there. And the minute I saw that, I thought that's what we need for the network. And I've kind of been on this journey. Containers took us closer to it, but probably still got a part to play. But increasingly trying to figure out how we, build a truly distributed cloud native network solution is the journey that I'm really trying to push at BT. And we've made steps towards it. Our entire TV platform that serves BT TV and BT Sport runs off that type of platform. That was kind of easy because it was greenfield. We're now trying to see what other services we can move to, and a lot of our target applications are around voice. And then, I also want to look at some of the 5G mobile apps as we pull control plane and user plane apart. It should be easier for some of them to work. And some of the other platforms out there are heading in a similar direction. So listen, I think that don't get me wrong, there are definitely in the short term some use cases around virtual firewalls and virtual PBXs that will probably be around for some time. But I think in telco land, I think if that's your strategy now, my advice would be to kind of think broader, and look at how we kind of try and move to this cloud native. It's a really easy term to say. It's difficult to do. We've got BT Network Cloud, which is our platform that is delivering our 5G core, and a lot of our other internal network services. It's got observation, it's got streaming telemetry, it's got a bit of AI. We want to add more to that as we learn. But it's to me, I just think virtualization just gives you too many things that get in your way on its own. And cloud native, let's not forget, it takes some of the core capabilities out of virtualization and allows you to use them in a more flexible way. At least that's what I believe, and allows you to move things much easier than if you've got someone on a train and they're anchored on your on your user gateway in London. That experience can be terrible. I want to be able to move them around my cloud as they're moving towards Edinburgh or somewhere else. And cloud native really makes some of those challenges easier.
Thank you very much. Diego, there are multiple technology options available for telcos. So are virtual machine VM platforms still one of those options?
Again, for particular niches, I guess so. I mean, it's something that the virtual machines were the approach back in the origins of all the ideas of a homogeneous infrastructure, etc. From the very beginning, I remember that at the very beginning of the NFV we were advocating for something that was a group of people dealing with performance and how to work with increasing the performance of the virtual machines, making them much more not only performing in terms of bandwidth, etc., but as well as Neil said, easier to move and to relocate, etc. And we were very much concerned about that, because it's true that the let's say vanilla virtual machines are very far away of what you would expect from a homogeneous network infrastructure. From there has been movements in precisely this direction with things like, for example, VPP or programmable data planes, etc. That, again, they follow the principles of having software moving around a homogeneous infrastructure and being programmable and dynamically reconfigurable and things like that, but they are not necessarily associated with the virtual machine running a set of software modules that were available before on a dedicated appliance. So, in summary, I think that virtual machines still, for the kind of services that you can think as being part of an end client-server interaction, like, for example, think about a radio server or something like that, well, could be a solution, and still they are in use. And probably they will remain in use because, you have to find some profit or return on the previous investment. But certainly virtual machines as we know them right now are not going to be at the core of this homogeneous infrastructure. Though the principles, the idea that you will have pieces of software that will run completely oblivious of whether they're running on a dedicated hardware or not, and that can be moved around, can be replicated, etc., for sure will apply one way or another.
Great, thank you very much for that, Diego. And Susan, what about your thoughts? Do you think VM platforms are still an option for telcos?
I don't look at it in that way. I would say typically we look at it from a workload perspective and what kind of platforms are the workloads sort of requiring to run on right now. And I think certainly in the IT space, in sort of the OSS/BSS space, the vast majority of those are moving quite rapidly to cloud native, to being container based. Certainly when you get back into the network, I think it also depends on the strategy of the individual service provider and how quickly they are they're adopting cloud native applications. And to Neil's point, it really depends on how cloud native those applications are. I mean, technically, you can be cloud native and be on virtual machines, but certainly as those applications are being rewritten and are transitioning to containers, those things will be easier to implement. But for sure, for many operators, they'll be deploying applications that are still requiring virtual machines. And then I would say it will transition from do you deploy those, VM-based or applications that are requiring VMs on a pure virtualization platform, or are you hosting them on a Kubernetes platform? Those are certainly options that you can explore. But I would say for the vast majority of the service providers, they're going to certainly be having VMs and virtual machine-based applications in their network for quite some time to come. And then how they transition those platforms, I think, becomes a question of economics and how quickly they're skilling up their organizations to work with Kubernetes platforms, or whether they're still more comfortable with a virtual platform.
Thank you, Susan. A great set of comments from everyone on that question. Now, we are almost out of time, but we did promise 5 questions from our viewers, so let's get the 5th one in. And in a way, we've partially answered this one, and also in the recent World Forum series of discussions. But let me ask it of you anyway. Maybe we can get some quick responses to this one. Should the public cloud play a role in a telco's open architecture strategy? Diego, let me start with you first.
Well, as usual, if you're talking about cloud infrastructure that can be used by many others, sure. I mean, why not? There is no reason why we cannot rely on the on massively publicly available infrastructure for certain services or for providing certain functionality, or even why not to precisely to deal with some excess of demand in some cases. Whether it has to be the backbone of telco networks, current cloud, public cloud, or the so-called public cloud, and the exascalers and all the like. Personally, I don't think that they can deal with the demands that we can put on the network infrastructure. So, yes, but not as being at the core of the network, as long as the public cloud doesn't evolve into something that is more closer to the famous 5.9 or telco grade or whatever you want to call it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Diego. Neil, what about you? What's your thoughts? Should the public cloud play a role in a telco's open architecture?
Yeah, I hate this question. So listen, I think if all they're doing is supplying tin and storage, I'm like, why would we bother doing that? If they're providing more value add, so we work very closely with GCP on leveraging their fantastic AI and data capability. Yes, I think that's, where it's got real value more than just tin and storage and memory. For sure, I want to use anything that's out there. But I also have to reflect on what my customers are doing. And many of our customers are moving towards the cloud, which means we need to support them. They need security, they need that, connectivity, they need to make sure that what they're moving into the cloud is going to work and is reliable. And many of them are turning to telcos to help with that journey. And we have many customers in the UK, but also globally, that we're helping with that challenge. So I think for core infrastructure, it feels really hard to me. But I think there's things that we can leverage from them. I mentioned Amazon's Elastic Kubernetes service. We can leverage that. There's other things that we've partnered with Google on. But my mind says that what our customers' requirements are kind of beyond what I think public cloud on itself offers us in terms of value. I mean, the public cloud guys have done so many fantastic innovations and capability. They've given massively, that's helping our industry. But I think when I reflect with what my customers' needs are, yes, there's a part to play. Is it mainstream? Probably not. But I would like to see much more what I call thing as a service, being able to, if I suddenly need a capability that I don't have, can I just call it like a programmable call and pull it into my environment that's perhaps hosted in Google or in Amazon, and can I use the public cloud in that way, or public as a service? I think for me that feels like a definite opportunity as more and more things become network dependent over time. I think that's for sure an opportunity, and then obviously things like disaster recovery, or if I suddenly want to open a new POP in Argentina and I don't want to build infrastructure in the public clouds there, then perhaps that's a way to do it, where we don't have the scale that we have, suppose, in our home network here in the UK. So, but I think it's very important that we as telecoms companies, as we move to be more technology companies, that we're able to really bring the value to our customers, and our customers see us as bringing the value and want to spend more with us. I think there's some folks have a belief that hyperscalers have taken a lot of our revenue. Actually, I think that revenue wasn't there to start with. They've kind of taken what customers wanted. I think we need to do more to be like them, to bring some of that revenue back into core telco.
Great. Thank you very much, Neil. And Susan, final thoughts from yourself on the question of should the public cloud play a role in telco's open architecture strategy?
Absolutely, I think, and again to Neil's point, and in Diego with Telefónica, you see so many use cases, particularly around those new 5G opportunities where it's not going to be one company that has the complete solution to offer, and they've completely changed the way we consume technology. On demand, so that you don't need to necessarily build out your own infrastructure, that you can consume it on your own terms to a large extent, that it's managed for you in many cases. So I see over the coming years a reshaping of how we put solutions together, and I expect that we'll see more solutions coming out from a combination of service providers, cloud providers, systems integrators, creating sort of industry specific solutions that they can take out to their customer base. So there's absolutely a role to play for all of us. And I do see a scenario where it can be mutually beneficial for all of us collaborating together. So I think it's going to play out over the coming years, and how it will also come down to economics of who gets the best scale in which areas that will provide the different parts of value in the different parts of the chain there.
Good points. Thank you very much, Susan. And Neil, do you have to come in on a final comment?
Actually, I should have said this, but I think the economics piece is really important. Cloud, running a 24/7 app for telco in the cloud is an insane amount of money. I mean, it's literally, you might as when I think of doing that, it makes my our bank manager here at BT have a heart attack. It is so expensive, and I think if the hyperscalers and public cloud guys are serious about working with telco, then they need to take a leaf out of our book. We do unlimited, so during the pandemic, everyone's been able to use our services, and we've been able to scale with it. How did that's the mode that telco works in. How do the hyperscalers support that? How do the public cloud support that? Because unless they move to that sort of thinking, it's going to be hard for us. Basically, we can't afford it ultimately. I think a 1 gig bandwidth flow out of a public cloud is something like $20,000 a month. And that's just mad. So I think there's a lot to work on the economics of how that would work with telecommunications companies, and how we can work more like what our customers demand from us.
Thank you, Neil. And we will definitely be picking up the economic points in an upcoming summit. Rest assured. For now, though, thanks all of you. Thank you very much indeed. That is the end of our discussion for today. Thank you for sharing your views and opinions with us. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our DSP Leaders Summit on the Open Telco, then don't forget to send us any questions you have on this subject, and we'll do our best to answer them in our live after-show program later today. And do take part in our online poll. You can find it below this video player window next to the Q&A app. All of today's programs are available to view online here at TelecomTV, and we'll be back tomorrow with another roundtable discussion for you. Until then, thanks for watching and goodbye.